us out to your meeting. I'm, as I said, Deanna, and I do community relations for the King County Department of Transportation for both transit and roads projects that King County is responsible for. So I have with me tonight Victor Besa, who's manager of service development at Metro, and Doug Johnson, who's a service planner assigned to transit service in this area. So we came mainly to answer your questions, tell you a little bit about the situation that Metro finds itself in financially, answer your questions. So we're really here to do that.
Great. Thanks a lot, you guys. Thanks for being here. Basically, yeah, of course.
Introduce myself. So I'm the manager of service development, and unfortunately I forgot my business cards tonight, and I'm going to leave some so that you can contact me. We're responsible for the planning of all the Metro's routes, both near-term and long-term. We do the scheduling, passenger facilities. We have a number of partnership employer programs, contracted services, so a wide array of things. We, being responsible for the planning of the Metro system, we've faced right now a very significant challenge in terms of our finances and the very real possibility that just over a year from now we'll have to further reduce the King County Metro system. Since the recession started in 2008, we've taken a number of actions to make our system more efficient. We've eliminated positions, we've put off capital programs, we've reduced some services, and we've also raised fares for riders during that period, 80%. We've tried to do quite a bit to reduce the size of the gap caused by the reduced amount of sales tax collections with the down economy. And that gap over a 6-year period from 09 to 15 was a $1.2 billion gap. The actions that we've taken to date close about $800 million of that gap, but we're still faced, and the actions we've taken to date represent an ongoing annual reduction in our cost or addition in our revenues of about $150 million per year, but we're still $75 million short. And when the temporary 2-year congestion reduction charge ends in the middle of 2014, that's a $20 vehicle license fee that's been in place for 2 years and has sustained our service. When that charge ends, then we face this financial gap and the potential need to reduce our system by as much as 17%. And that's the focus of several of your questions and the information we have on the board, and was highlighted as an illustration in a recent service guidelines report that we issued a couple of months back. I do want to say, as the head of planning, and I know for Doug and Deanna, our report also identifies that today there are demonstrated needs for transit throughout King County, and applying our guidelines to the countywide system suggests we should be growing our system by 10% based upon current needs. We're very aware of needs throughout the county. There's not a city or community that I've presented to or visited where that community has not asked us to provide more of or sustain the services that they have. You generally provide more of the services that we offer. That, as planners, we would much rather be building a system than working out how we dismantle it piece by piece and reduce its effectiveness, because we know it impacts your lives and lives of people throughout King County. So I appreciate very much the invitation to come here, and it's obvious that we're all Seattleites because it's a beautiful sunny day, but it's a bit too hot, so we've all come inside to have a little meeting. Because it's just too much, we can only handle so much of that sunshine out there. So I am happy to see you all. I know you have some difficult questions for us tonight. We're happy to respond to them. You will not like all of our answers. I know that. But we do believe in engaging you directly, trying to be as direct and honest as we can about what our prospects are, how we go about this planning, why we've made certain choices along the way. So welcome your questions, and thank you for the invitation. I understand this is a relatively new, if not brand new, community council.
It is.
And it's great to see the participation of the community.
Thank you.
So.
Thank you. Want to introduce yourself?
Oh, yeah.
I leave Doug with not a whole lot more to say.
I'm Doug Johnson. I'm one of the service planners working for Victor, and my area has been, over the years, working in South Seattle, South King County, Southeast King County, Vashon Island. So I've worked on many of the services in this area over the years, and worked for Victor.
Great, thank you. So the whole reason that we started this community council was there was an armed robbery at Roxhill Park at 4:30 on a Tuesday. And it was a robbery of two young men robbing four 13-year-olds with guns. And people were very upset, obviously. The whole community was just up in arms. And this is how this community started, was out of that need of, hey, this is our neighborhood. We've got to do something to help stop this kind of thing from happening. As that was happening, the park was being rebuilt. They were building a skate park, so there weren't a lot of people there to watch what was going on. And Metro started parking their buses there. And it's a wall of buses. It's literally a wall of buses that cover from the crosswalk all the way over to 29th. And there's two problems with that. Number one, it creates a visible barrier between the road and the park to see what's going on there. It also makes turning out of 29th onto Barton difficult. And what we're seeing as a community is more and more buses coming to Westwood Village. With the reroute in September, now we're having the 120 terminate there instead of White Center. We're having the 125 terminate there instead of White Center. We're having the 21 come there. We're having Rapid Ride. We have all of these bus lines stopping at Westwood Village. What is Metro's position? What is your intention for the Westwood Village area?
Well, and with many of your questions, I'll begin the answer. Doug may chime in with some of the very route-specific details. We are creating and have created a transit hub at Westwood Village. Westwood Village represents an activity center for the community. It also represents access to an array of places to shop, but also fresh food. And for some of the areas that we provide our services in White Center, some of unincorporated King County, they're what are referred to as food deserts, where disadvantaged lower-income people don't have access to fresh foods and don't have access to good grocery stores within walking distance of their neighborhoods. Many of you, if you're in Arbor Heights, you may not be able to walk there, but you certainly have relatively close access to it. So we have intentionally created a hub of transit activity, both to bring people to this location for shopping and for the activities that go on at Westwood Village. We've also, as we do in many areas throughout our county, to maximize the limited number of resources we have. We operate 1,400 buses in a county of 2 million people. There's probably 2 million cars out there, and we're trying to provide as much as those 2 million cars provide for people in terms of travel options as we can with 1,400 buses. So we do that by creating transit hubs and transit centers where many different routes converge, providing more convenient transfer opportunities for those who are using those routes. I'm sure I'm going to get some questions about services and scaling back of services in Arbor Heights. As I said earlier, I don't go anywhere in King County where people don't want us to provide more service. People love bus service. They don't necessarily love buses. They are big vehicles.
And
they undoubtedly are big vehicles, and they do create a visual barrier. They do, though, also bring people. They bring drivers who have eyes on that side of the park. They bring some presence, just like our buses. We have very limited numbers of Metro Transit Police, but we work with Seattle Police and other city police departments. So when there are reports of incidences, we do, either directly or through the local police, follow up. We do provide eyes on the road and on the park that otherwise wouldn't be there. And so there's a creation of activity. There is a visual barrier. I cannot deny that. These are big vehicles that come there. The convergence of services to try to provide more mobility and more access for more people.
To follow up on that, what is the plan for White Center? Now that you've eliminated these routes to come up to White Center is a thriving community. It has revitalized itself. It has a lot of new people coming to it. And Metro has basically decided that Westwood was going to be the place that people were going to go to terminate and not White Center. Is there any plan for buses to come back up to the White Center area?
I don't think we've diminished services in White Center. We continue to operate a White Center Transit Center, and I'll let Doug talk about the numbers of routes and what connections
There
they
are 6 routes
provide.
that operate through White Center, 7 routes operating through Westwood. 2 of the routes connect between Westwood and White Center. So we did a big reorganization last year, so there were some changes. But for instance, the 60 used to end at White Center, and now it's been extended up here to Westwood. It still serves White Center. That was one thing we heard repeatedly last year when we were doing our public process, was how important it would be for, and how nice it would be for 60 riders if it would just go that next quarter mile, half mile to Westwood. That's been a positive change, but we're still serving White Center. The 120 now is serving both White Center and Westwood. We didn't diminish the service provided by the 120 to White Center. It's serving both en route. And that was another request that we heard repeatedly over the years was, is there any way that the Route 120 could connect Dillridge over to Westwood? So that was something we tried to do with our service reorganization last year. So there's still an abundance of service into White Center. There's just not necessarily as much of the service that's ending there as there was prior to the reorganization.
Great, thank you. The second question, and this is really a bone of contention for everybody and a majority of the people who are here, is Arbor Heights. I'm going to try not to get angry about this. I don't live in Arbor Heights. I live at 23rd and Roxbury, so I can walk to tons of bus stops. Even the ones that they eliminated, I can still get around. But when I look at the map of what services they want to cut, you want to cut, what is Arbor Heights supposed to do without a bus route? What would you like everyone in Arbor Heights, and there's how many people who live in Arbor Heights?
7,000?
7,000 people in Arbor Heights. To do. Yeah, and I know, and we'll get to your questions. I promise. But I want to give everybody, an opportunity to hear what they have to say, and then we can follow up.
Just for comparison, there's more people that live. There's as many people that live in Arbor Heights as do in Ballard proper.
And we know how Ballard is going. So
Ballard,
Ballard.
Is that right?
the market area where all the transit is.
So why? What is the plan for Arbor Heights? Are you going to have connector buses running all day so that people can get? Tell us what the plan is.
And this is concerning a potential reduction, like.
This is the
This
illustration.
is the elimination
right.
of
I mean,
routes to
Arbor Heights is already, like, I'm one of the lucky people that live right next to Roxbury, so I mean, I walk down to Safeway and 30th to catch my buses in the
Right.
morning. But the people that live down, past 106th, I mean, that's, you're forcing every single person in Arbor Heights
To drive.
to drive if they have to work downtown.
And if they have to drive, they're going to drive to Westwood Village to take the rapid ride. Now, where are all those cars going to be parked? It's not a transit hub. It's not a park and ride. It's a shopping center.
Right. Well, I want to take it in two parts, because we made some changes last fall that reduced services to Arbor Heights in terms of the all-day services. We've made some adjustments, and we plan some further adjustments this coming fall to mitigate some of what we pulled out of there last fall. When we adopted a new Metro strategic plan in 2011, it also came along with a new set of service planning guidelines, which provide direction to Doug and me and others in terms of the changes that we make in the transit system should be based on balancing the productivity of the system, addressing social equity by providing services where people who are most in need of transit have access to transit, and providing geographic value, which is continuing to connect all of the places in King County. In our service, we have a county of 2,100 square miles, so we have a wide-ranging geographic area that we're responsible to serve. And that we should make changes to services based upon objective data. And that, with respect to services in Arbor Heights, partly the location of it. One of the differences between a Ballard and an Arbor Heights is kind of off to the edge. It's not in the middle of travel paths to and from Northgate, North Seattle, to the east, to the University District, and many other highly dense communities. So it's not adjacent and kind of along the way. In fact, north of Ballard, we've made changes to pull back services very similar, and west of Ballard, out Seaview Avenue, Golden Gardens area, we made very similar changes to what we refer to as the tails of routes. So if you look at the service that we reduced in Arbor Heights, the 22 local, less than 5% of the riders were boarding in Arbor Heights, but the cost of that service represented about 20% of the cost of operating that route.
The 21 local.
The 21 local, excuse me. We have 217 routes. That's why Doug is here as the expert for this area with all the numbers. But the basic point is there was information about use of the system in that area that represented the data that we examined that led us to scaling back the services. We left in the 21 Express, providing commuter connections throughout the day. A couple of the changes that we plan in September is to extend the routing of the 22 local that now connects to the junction to a wider area in Arbor Heights that would run the same path as the 21 Express. We're also going to add a stop for Rapid Ride at 35th and Roxbury. So it goes eastbound from Westwood Village and then loops around. So we will be adding a stop for Rapid Ride. So in the near term, without new resources to grow the system, but just managing the resources that we have there, what we did last fall was try to pull away service resources. These are dollars. They represent buses on the road and drivers on the road, and focus them more on the places of corridors and places where the most people ride, because we have a lot of crowding in our system today. We don't have new resources to put at it. So as my boss, our general manager, refers to as robbing Peter to pay Paul, to reorganize the system. That is more productive, that is more efficient, but it definitely has an impact on the individuals, however many or few they are in those individual trips that no longer have the access that they used to. Some are able to walk to the corridors where we have more frequent service. Others may have to get in their car. To the reduction illustration that we've drawn essentially based upon our guidelines, and this report is available online, takes a very broad look using our guidelines, but not really specific, refined, route-by-route, trip-by-trip planning. We're in that process now to get more refined with what could become not very palatable, but ultimately a proposal for how we would really cut 600,000 hours in the system. In the illustration, applying our guidelines, again, taking 600,000 hours out of a 3.5 million hour system, 17% of our system, means we have to go far beyond those routes that aren't carrying very many people. And we've already trimmed the fat, if you will, in the system, the inefficiencies from the system. And we would be removing routes while carrying relatively fewer people, still significant numbers of people. So the 21 Express, the 21 Local in that area. It would essentially cut Arbor Heights off to access at 35th and Roxbury, or at Westwood, or via private automobiles. Unfortunately, that would be the case in many, many communities around King County where we would make similar changes. So again, these are not desirable changes for our transit system. They're not what we would want to do. They're not what the need suggests in terms of development, locations of disadvantaged communities, lower income communities, and the levels of service we currently provide, the crowding on our system that currently occurs. But to remove nearly 20% of our system, it will come out of places where people rely on it and use it. We project that about 30,000 more cars would be on our roadways throughout King County. We have a significant impact on congestion, particularly in the peak periods during weekdays, by the provision of bus service, adding capacity to the state highway system. That has a tremendous value to the region in terms of reducing congestion, providing alternatives, reducing the total amount of fuel spent sitting in congestion. And this is not a great option, but it is similar to cuts that would occur throughout the county. In my neighborhood of Wallingford, my 26 local, which is my daily route, there's a 26 express as well. The 26 local is one of those on the reductions in the illustration. So when I say we'd look at it in more detail, we would try to find ways where we could mitigate impacts where possible. It is, there's not a magic bullet. If you're cutting hours, if it's not coming from Arbor Heights, it's coming from someplace else. And when you look at the information about where people are using the system, it's going to come from a lot of different places. So the ultimate proposal will not be significantly different, but we will go through more detailed planning and have more detailed information and the most current information. The other thing about our illustration is it's based upon data from a year ago. We'll be updating it to data based upon this spring before we make a formal proposal to the public.
Oh, thank you. The one thing that really struck me was the West Seattle blog did an interview, a 45-minute interview with Kevin Desmond. He sat down and answered their questions. And one of the things that really struck me was he had mentioned Metro would like more choice riders. And when he said choice riders, I thought, what does he mean by that? And what he means is people who may get a choice to ride the bus. And he is looking to add more people who get bus passes from their jobs. People who are given bus passes where they don't have to pay for them themselves. And I know you can't speak for Kevin Desmond, and I understand that. But you had mentioned social equity. And I think I could drive my car to my job. I have a car. I could drive it. I could park. It would cost me more money. The bus service is here to serve the community who cannot ride or drive a car or ride a bike or any of those things. And when you are going to be cutting off areas, not just Arbor Heights, but any of these other areas, what alternatives do people have for public transportation? I know that there's an access system that will come and pick people up who are disabled. How does that work? What are the alternatives for people who are living in Arbor Heights, who are now going to lose their bus service, who can't drive? What is their alternative? Is there something that Metro will offer them? Is access going to be expanded? Van pool. Can you touch on that a little bit?
A lot of questions.
Yeah, I know.
in that.
I was trimming it back.
In terms of options, today and in the future, we'll continue to offer access paratransit service. Anywhere we offer fixed route service, we're required to offer a complimentary paratransit system for people with disabilities who are unable to use that fixed route system. We also support community access vans and a program called the Hyde Shuttle, which delivers services for seniors and people with disabilities, not low income specifically, right? It's seniors and people with disabilities.
Self-identified.
It is self-identifying, so there's not a registration process to go through. We do that in partnership with Senior Services of Seattle, King County. We do offer a commuter van program, which for people with jobs all going to the same location from the same neighborhood. It's a very good option. We have the largest commuter van program in the nation with over I think we're up to 1,300 vans on the road.
So 1,400
Relative to
buses,
our
1,300.
relative to our bus system, you know, those are carrying about 5 people per vehicle. Our buses are carrying many more. So but it is an option for people. In terms of disadvantaged communities and how we serve them and choice riders, we have a very different urban transit system from most other major urban areas in the U.S. Cleveland, Detroit, L.A., where buses are essentially for poor people and not for the rest of the community. And they're often not operated very well. The equipment is not in very good condition. We have historically grown as a system that serves our areas where there are lower income, where people of color are concentrated. Every 3 years, we're required to report to the federal government a report that's called Equity in Transit. It's to show how we comply with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. There's a Title VI section that's applicable to public transportation systems. And when you look at the distribution of our routes, the distribution of our fleet and our passenger facilities, we do quite well in matching up. Where there are higher concentrations of low income and people of color are places where we have higher concentrations of service. The Rainier Valley is probably the highest served area other than downtown Seattle and the University District in King County. We are in the process of catching up to. We have a fairly extensive network in South King County where a lot more lower income people have either moved to, migrated to, out of Seattle and or immigrated, recent immigrants. South King County, much more diverse, much poorer than it was a decade ago. When I say this plan identifies another 350,000 hours of needs, 10% growth, many of those are based upon our social equity factors in our corridor analysis, where we examine places where, by census tracts, where there's a higher proportion of low income or people of color than the countywide average. There are added points in our corridor evaluation. When we compare current service levels to what the guidelines suggest, where there's a gap where it's lower than the guidelines suggest, that is the investment we're saying we need to make in those communities. And many of those investments are identified for South King County and Seattle in areas where there are disadvantaged communities. But we do have a significant commuter-oriented service, 25,000 park and ride spaces throughout King County, somewhere near $140, $150 million in annual service on state highways. About half of our routes are expressly for weekday commuter service. And we have over 1,500 employers throughout King County that participate in providing an employee benefit to their employees by fully or partially subsidizing their bus passes and purchasing them directly as employers for distribution to employees. They represent about half of our total fare revenue. So having a system that addresses the needs of the disadvantaged and the needs of people who have choice means that when we go for a public vote, certainly in Seattle, a little less so as we get to the fringes of King County, typically there's high levels of support from the entire community for more public transit because it meets the needs of a broader array of people. It drives economic growth. Our ridership typically leads jobs growth. It often is leading housing growth as we have spikes of ridership as we're having right now. Last year was our second highest ridership year ever. So it's a real dichotomy where we have stronger transit demand than we ever have. When you look at the sound transit system, this region is carrying more people on transit than it ever has. Over 140 million annually. King County last year was about 115 million of that 143 million. So demand is high. We're serving a lot of the community. That's why Kevin says we want to continue to attract choice riders. We don't want to diminish the quality of service and the quality of the overall network such that it's only a choice for those who have no other choices.
It's a fine line to walk, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. And this will lead to a lower service quality. Even those routes that are untouched will have much higher demand, much more crowding, and will be harder to be attractive to those who can hop in their car and pay parking charges.
I was just going to add, just so people know, that Metro's funding, 60% of it comes from sales tax, 24% comes from fares, and the rest is other grants, revenues, things like that, contracts. So, when we talk about this funding gap, just think that's context to consider.
You had mentioned the commuter routes, which I think is a really important thing for our area. Joe and I and many of us ride the bus to work as a commuter thing. I currently ride the 113. That's my commuter. It's a great route. It gets me downtown super fast. From my house to University and First, it takes 25 minutes, which is excellent. I think it's a great thing. There are other commuter routes coming off of Vashon. 113 is looking to be cut. There's a park and ride on Roxbury. I don't know if you guys know that. There's actually a park and ride on Roxbury, which would lead to the commuters using that.
Where is it?
It's actually at 20th. It's right across the street from the church.
The one by the church?
Yeah,
The
18,
one
yeah,
slot
yeah.
By
It's
the
a lease
Catholic
park and
church.
ride.
Yeah, it's a park and ride, which is kind of weird, but that's where it is. So if you eliminate these commuter routes, people who are using that now, what options do they have? My option would be either the 120, which takes me all the way around up Delridge, which takes me about 45 minutes to get to work, or the rapid ride, which takes me 40 minutes to get to work. The rapid ride is not very rapid. Sorry. When you're talking commuters, is that what you're basically saying to us? And this kind of is going to get into the rapid ride issue. You're going to force all of us to ride rapid ride, aren't you? I mean, that's pretty much where you're headed, because you have a federal grant to build this system. You have invested a lot of time and energy and incredible resources to redo curbs and signs and everything into this rapid ride. Is that basically what we're looking at in West Seattle? And I'm talking West Seattle. I care about other areas, but this is where I live. These are the people that I'm talking to and serving. Is that the plan?
Well, as most of these questions tonight, it kind of deserves what we've done to date, what we would do if we had more resources, and what
I know,
is
but I'm
illustrated
asking
as part of
about,
the
are you going to make us all ride rapid ride?
Answer the question.
So, we continue to offer today many different routes into Seattle. You gave some examples there on Vashon Island, on the ferry dock, the 113 coming through, serving Olson Myers, and others that, depending upon where you're at in the southwest area of Seattle and King County, that continue to provide options for people. And a lot of them are for people traveling all the way into downtown Seattle. Some of them, like the 120, have many different ons and offs along the entirety of the corridor, including very full buses coming into and coming out of downtown Seattle. When we created Rapid Ride, we did concentrate some of those services, so some of them, like the 55 and 57, still in place, have fewer trips than they used to. We added trips to routes like the 116 that travels where the 54 Express used to travel. So we added a crosstown route, the Route 50, that goes through Soto. Many people who do use it today transfer very conveniently to light rail at the Soto station. Don't take it all the way over to the Rainier Valley, where it ultimately provides an east-west connection that Pete, way back when, was one of those advocating for east-west connections from West Seattle. We had difficulties in launching it. There's no denying that. And we were not completely ready when we launched it with respect to facilities. And we had trouble keeping the service on time, which meant buses bunched and became very crowded. We added a lot of trips to the C line almost immediately and continuing through that first service change. We've modified schedules in February. We will again in June, and we will continue to fine-tune them in September. While we have kind of said to many people in West Seattle, this is your primary choice, We've also seen ridership spike tremendously. It is 45% higher than it was in the year prior to making a significant service investment in the 54. I'll come back to that in a moment. But we've also seen that despite the difficulties it's had, that ridership has continued to grow month over month from its launch in September. When we began planning the C line, the 54, 54 Express, 55 were carrying about 3,500 riders a day. Rapid Ride today carries nearly 6,500 riders a day. One of the things that we did in rolling it out, in part because of the construction going on with the viaduct being replaced. Originally, we were going to launch it in 2011. We didn't want to launch it in the midst of the worst year of that construction. If you remember, before the First Avenue ramp was done, how bad travel times were, how unpredictable they were. But what we did do is add the hours we'd set aside for Rapid Ride investment to the 54, and we built ridership significantly during that year before adding our red buses and our real-time signs and our Orca readers at stations. So it didn't appear that we had added much. What we'd done for the community was actually make the investment a year earlier, but when we launched it with fanfare and we didn't deliver on that fanfare, and it wasn't a huge increment from what people had seen in the 54, all of that added up to kind of this impression that I'm being forced to ride Rapid Ride and it's slower than my options before. It's not slower than the local routes that used to operate. It's faster by 5 or 6 minutes, depending upon the period direction. It's more reliable in terms of delivering on schedule. And this schedule is now a bus every 10 minutes or a bus every 15 minutes compared to the local services before. But it has been extremely crowded and extremely popular. That's been both, a blessing to see so many people respond to it, but it's been part of what people experience as not as nice an experience as their prior local or prior express trip.
Question if you guys have these numbers. Before Rapid Ride launched, how many riders per day were coming out of West Seattle?
Well, it went from 3,500 in 07 to somewhere around 5,000 to 5,500, and that's now over 6,000. We're up from the spring of 2011, before we made that investment in the 54. We've increased our daily boardings by 45%.
In West Seattle.
So that's, well, the market is essentially from its terminal at Westwood Village, West Seattle, to downtown. In fact, when it's crossing the bridge, its last stop in West Seattle, it has the D line sign on it. Coming out of downtown, when it hits Belltown, it has the C line sign on it. So it includes that downtown to and from ridership.
So it's like the 54 local, the 54 express, and the 55 are the three routes that...
So that's what I mean, like, not talking specifically about users of Rapid Ride before 2012, but I mean 2011, 2010, X number of people every day came out of our peninsula to go.
On all routes.
On all
Yeah,
routes.
all routes.
Oh, on all routes.
That's what I mean, like,
I don't have the number on the top of my head.
that's I'd be curious to see if that is going up or down.
That's gone up, not at the rate of Rapid Ride growth, because we have focused
Because you
people.
condensed people
We
onto
have
Rapid
we have
Ride.
focused people to that corridor. We've attracted a lot of people. We have overall ridership growth, the system about 2 to 3%, and because we have samples of our ridership throughout the system, it's accurate at a system level. It's harder to get that route by route accuracy. We do on the Rapid Ride, because we equip that fleet. Half of that fleet has passenger counters in the doorways. The rest of our fleet is about 18% equipped. So it's collecting data, but we need a longer period of time of that collection to have reliable samples for each individual route.
So the
overall is in
growth's
that
not
2 to 3%
the overall census growth.
Right, and it looks like between fall and now, it's growing at a faster rate than the rest of the system, but again, just a few percent. And again, a few percent on 115 million system-wide is several million additional annual rides.
Thank you.
Victor, can you say more about moving forward? If we're in a reduction scenario, are we orienting people towards riding Rapid Ride, trunk route? How does policy direct us in that?
Well, routes like the 120, the C line, the 21, They will be routes that you won't see in here on the reductions list. But when we remove a 113, when we remove several commuter routes from the Fauntleroy Ferry Dock into town, when we scale back some other routes in the network, those will be primary options for many more people. They will become more crowded, and service quality will suffer as a result. And people will still have some options, particularly those who are able to get a half mile instead of a block or two or a quarter mile to get to the local route. But it will be there, but not as high a quality.
You had mentioned a new rapid ride stop at 35th and Barton. Are there any additional plan?
35th and Roxbury.
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm sorry, 35th and Roxbury. Are there any other plan for Roxbury?
Sir, one quick question
Plan
on that one,
stops.
by the way, which I'm sure other people are curious. How you guys changed the 21 so that it goes down Barton and then loops back around Roxbury and then comes home to Barton. Is the rapid ride still going to terminate at Roxbury?
Yes.
So you'll have to switch rides, or is it going to go back around again?
No, it's not going to double loop like the 21 does.
So it'll still terminate at Westwood?
Right, we're just adding an additional new rapid ride stop at 35th and Roxbury.
Okay.
Will there be another stop on Roxbury? Farther up
There's
towards
not
White Center?
currently a plan. There's
one
there
at
is
20,
one there.
we
20.
have the
There's
stop
one
at
at
Roxbury
28th.
28th. So no, we just add the stop at Roxbury and 35th, and then the next one is
So-
at Barton.
Everybody from 26th east will have to, what, to get to Rapid Ride? Walk?
Well, the
Ride their
20
bike?
The 21 makes that loop.
So they will have
The 21
to
is there.
transfer from one bus to another within just a few blocks.
Well, but it's not, I mean, the 120
I
is
mean,
still...
the 21 doesn't go up Roxbury. It goes to 26. What I'm saying is anything from 26th east to White Center to 17th, if you're going to cut the 113, you're going to reduce the 125, you're reducing a lot of these commuter routes for those people. How do people from Highland Park get to Rapid Ride?
Well, it depends on where people want to travel. I mean, you can still,
Downtown.
as Victor said, you still have, the 120 is still there for some of those folks.
But I guess
east of
I'm talking
26, the 131.
specifically commuter routes, like the 113. The 113 is
Right.
a commuter route.
The 113 would be discontinued in the illustration.
So
along-
those people
Right.
that ride the commuter route 113 would now have to ride basically a local.
Right.
Yes, and these are changes, so if you look through the report, were these full packets or maps?
They have just this area map,
Okay.
they don't have full map.
So you only have one of these maps, but we have 8 maps of King County, and they all look like the southwest area. If we have to reduce the system to this degree, it will decrease convenience. It will increase walk distances. It will increase the numbers of people who will need to transfer to reach their ultimate destination, and will increase the numbers of people who will ride less convenient and/or slower routes to get to their ultimate destination. There is nothing but downsides to having to cut our system 17%.
I guess I just have one more.
But we're not singling out this area in any way. If you look through the
65 routes
entirety.
system-wide are
I-
discontinued.
Like I
86
said,
routes are
I
reduced
care
system-wide.
about the system as a whole, but my focus is this area.
It's just
because-
important to know that
Yeah, we're all
not
gonna
single out this area. It's what we have to do everywhere.
This question isn't on the agenda, but it's a question that I think, for me personally, I see a lot of effort being made of Metro to reduce rates and figure out how to be, I guess, more efficient. I guess you're going for efficiency. How much energy is being put into finding funding or coming up with solutions to not have to do this?
Well, King County Metro is part of King County government, and our authority to collect anything beyond fares is only available if the state legislature grants that authority. So today we have the authority to collect 9/10 of a penny in sales tax. and we are collecting that full amount in King County. We have a 2-year authority to collect $20 on license registrations in King County. That brings in about $26 million per year. Sales taxes, I think, are $350 million per year. Fairs have, the revenues from fairs have nearly doubled as we've increased our base fare from $1.25 to $2.25 over 4 consecutive 25-cent increases, an 80% increase. We get about $140 million from our fair revenue. We have a very small amount of property tax authority, which originally came to us to provide services across statewide 520 associated with the implementation of tolling. So we have 5.5 cents per $1,000 value of property tax, of which 1 penny has to be dedicated to State Route 520. Then we get some federal grants, mostly for our bus fleet. Our bus fleet is about the only capital program we have. We have some to maintain our facilities, but we're not building a lot of new facilities. Our rapid ride corridors were supported with significant amounts of federal funds to provide the stations, to provide grants for the buses, $120 million of a $190 million program. Many of those buses would have been purchased to provide the service that is there in any case, so that's part of that $190 million to build those corridors. And they are corridors, the 6 corridors that are rapid ride are 10% of our daily ridership use service on those corridors. So there's a significant proportion of Metro's daily ridership.
How much revenue comes from the advertising on the buses?
Advertising revenue system-wide is somewhere in the 5 to 10 million annually. So it's an important amount. It's not we can't make up our differential with more advertising. So we have been advocating. King County Metro staff is not allowed to advocate for or against ballot measures or funding from the state. But King County legislators and King County as a government has lobbyists and a coalition of businesses, environmentalists, Transit Choices Coalition, Transportation Choices Coalition, and others, including the Sound Cities Association, City of Seattle. Sound Cities used to be the Suburban Cities Association. For the first time in my 20-plus years working at Metro, that entire coalition is united in asking the state legislature not to give King County more money from the general fund of the budget, but merely to authorize the ability for King County to put on a local ballot local tax measures to sustain and hopefully grow the King County Metro system. So this is as significant and as coordinated as that effort has ever been at the state legislature. As you probably know, they're in special session, having a hard time deciding even on the state budget, which has to be decided before they end. Prospects for them for granting a local authority to King County to go to the ballot, which for Metro would be a portion of a motor vehicle excise tax, 60% of about an average $100 vehicle license fee. The other 40% would go to cities and unincorporated King County for roads. So there's an extremely active effort at the state legislature to be granted the authority to just ask local voters, will you support this system and our roads needs?
So if that measure is granted, then likely this fall, King County would be faced with making a choice on that ballot measure. I mean, this fall we'd have to start public outreach, if not sooner, around reductions in service countywide. So it's timing that's what kind of we're looking at as an agency. There's a brochure that we brought that describes the solutions that coalition of people is looking for, so that you can see what the state legislature is considering.
2 questions just related to that. I'm sure someone else is going to ask this. So if Olympia gives us the right to raise taxes, does that have to go to a vote, or can the King County Council just put it out there and we're done?
They can provide authority that can be acted upon by to King County Council. But all the discussion through most of this session has been about if any authority is provided, it would be provided for a public vote.
And if either the measure in the special session or this levy vote falls through, what's stopping individual cities, Seattle, Burien, Shoreline, whatever, from handing you a check to keep their local service going?
We do get some of those checks already. It's a really small amount in the total system, but the city of Seattle is the largest contributor to a program that we started when Transit Now was passed, a 1% sales tax measure in 2006, implemented 7 through 9, and then we, other than the rapid ride component of it and the partnership component of it. So there are about 100,000 annual hours of service where cities and employers are paying 1/3 of the cost, and through Transit Now, Metro had set aside the other 2/3. City of Seattle has upwards of, I think it's $1.5 million a year. Again, it's an important additive amount. It's not there aren't cities out there that are stepping up to fill the gap, and most of them have their own local roads needs and or other infrastructure needs.
Do we have any other questions?
I don't.
I think if it's okay, then we'll take a short break, and then we can open up the floor to questions.